Salutations, one and all, and welcome to RWBY Recapped. So this is it. The final episode of Volume 9 has gone live, and so for better or worse, we're now waiting once again. Spoiler warning, if you haven't seen the episode, then you'll want to do that before watching this video. We begin, once again, with Summer reading to young Yang and RWBY. As she finishes the story, she says to their sleeping forms, "I love you just the way you are." What prompted this? You'd only say something like that to your kid when they feel like they aren't good enough or something like that. This seems out of place. She then has a short talk with Taiyang and tells him that she's going on another mission for Ozpin. She gives no details of this mission, and Taiyang assumes that it's going to turn out to be another patrol, implying that this has happened before. But instead, she meets Raven of all people. The two have a brief back and forth, with Raven dodging the issue of her abandoning her daughter. Summer actually shoulder bashes her as she walks past, showing that this really has rubbed her the wrong way. Summer claims that, if I do this right, then there's nothing to worry about. Raven then opens a portal, and the two step through. If you were hoping for any sort of expounding upon what this was leading to, however, then you're going to be sorely disappointed, like me. This also implies that Summer and Raven were meeting someone that Raven cares about, as her portals open to people, not static locations. Taiyang is ruled out, as is Yang, so the only other person that we know that she possesses a link with would be Crow. Whether this was to him or not, though, we have no answers, as we see nothing more after this matter. Apparently, RWBY was seeing this somehow, saying in disbelief, "She lied." RWBY then pushes the case containing, apparently, Summer's weapon over, and it shatters. This comes off as incredibly disrespectful. Your mother died trying to keep you and everyone else safe, and you're going to callously disregard that? Talk about ungrateful. She says to the Smith, "Are you just trying to tell me that it's useless? That I shouldn't even try? Become someone else?" The Smith responds with, "Is that what I'm telling you?" Yes, you have literally been offering her that exact option. You told her, "Take any of my weapons and you can be someone else." That is precisely what you've been offering her. Don't try and play dumb now. You've laid your intentions bare. Claiming that you aren't doing exactly that is a lie, and a pathetic excuse for one at that. We then shift to Jean, who sees a vision of Alex. She says, "You were never the hero. You couldn't save me." Yeah, because you poisoned him and ran off, you disingenuous vermin. Don't blame him for the consequences of your actions. You got what was coming to you. What follows is rather baffling. Alex then declares, "Maybe it's time for a change. Be the kind of man you always wanted to be." He's been trying to do that for quite some time now. What are you trying to say? What change are you insinuating? Jean suffered no injury from the previous episode, however, and realistically, he shouldn't have. His aura never broke, and even if it had, the Pyrrha illusion just slashed at his back, while he has armor. It doesn't matter how strong you aren't cutting metal like that. That is the very thing I brought up in my armor episode of RWBY Revisited. Jean cuts several limbs from the tree, which then fall around the cat, and he calls out for the remaining members of Team RWBY to burn them. Upon doing so, the cat is surrounded by smoke like the main cast were in the herbalist's house. The cat announces that the tree's leaves have no effect on him, and inhales the smoke to taunt them. Jean counters by saying that that's true for him, but not for Neo. The cat then ejects himself from Neo when she begins to experience hallucinations, and then has a sort of final boss form. I would like to question how everyone else avoided breathing in that same smoke, though. Smoke kind of gets everywhere, and not breathing it in isn't something you can just simply avoid if you're in close proximity. But the Smith then says to RWBY, "Your time is running out. You must choose. Choose someone who can leave your burdens behind, or choose one who will be enough to bear them. All while the others fight the cat." So you are telling her to die and become someone else. We even get a shot of Jean's aura breaking, something that has happened quite rarely to him compared to everyone else. Odd how Weiss, Blake, and Yang haven't had theirs broken, despite having comparatively weaker auras. Nothing comes of this, however. But another case appears, and why it does so is not explained. This one contains Crescent Rose, and RWBY inquires, "What happens if I choose me?" To which the Smith responds, "Then maybe that girl is enough." That runs completely antithetical to every single thing you've said up to this point. You've been urging her at every single turn since your appearance in episode 5 to become someone else, and now you're backtracking. Don't pretend that this is what you've been saying when it clearly isn't. But RWBY chooses Crescent Rose and breaks out of her wooden cocoon chrysalis thing. The others have expressions of only the smallest amount of care, as though this was nothing more than waking up from surgery. Your friend was devoured by this tree, and you didn't care. She threw herself into the wood chipper, and your response was, "It was her choice." And then when she defies the odds and someone else isn't spat out in her place, this is all you can muster. This half-hearted look of nothing being out of the ordinary. Unbelievable. But now they defeat the cat, after a lengthy sequence of RWBY fighting it by herself. Seriously, it takes 22 seconds for them to get involved. That doesn't sound like a long time, but imagine that someone is attacking you right now and you can't do anything about it. That's enough time for them to end you several times over. Get in there and do something. But with the cat's defeat, I have to question why RWBY's involvement was so critical. Their maneuver of Weiss encaging them in glyphs and having them all hit the cat could have been done without her. She doesn't provide a leadership bonus to them. They just win. If the point was that this was a morale boost, then that was undermined by their vapid reaction to her return. Her presence didn't do anything major. The cat was stomping them before, only to become their punching bag all of a sudden once she shows up. The cat then tries to make RWBY doubt herself again by saying that she's incomplete and ruins everything as all humans do. And the others counter by saying that this isn't the case and that's why they follow her. Again, you didn't care earlier, so this runs counter to what you've displayed. Yang, you yourself, unjustly, chewed her out in the beginning of the last season, but the cat is then devoured by Neo's Jabberwockers. Thank the powers that be. I know some people wanted the cat to live and go to Remnant, but honestly, why? This thing is evil, selfish, and vile. You don't want someone like that alive to continuously try to kill you. You alright had an interesting theory about the cat being the spirit of the Relic of Choice, and while that was certainly interesting, this rules that out. Really, it was an interesting thought experiment, but the timeline doesn't line up with that. The cat predates the relics. Many people also don't consider it heroic for a protagonist or similar main character to kill a villain, but I've always disagreed with that. It's more villainous to let them live and give them the free opportunity to do more evil. You don't give them hugs and kisses, you put them down. They aren't smiles, rainbows, and ice cream, they're an oil spill. Neo then confronts her illusion of Roman and acknowledges that he isn't real, and then floats down with her umbrella into the tree, and we see her get her own statue. Again, this is sick. Humans and Faunus are beings that can determine their own purpose. You don't need to have this psychedelic trip to pick a goal in life. RWBY managed to somehow dodge that bullet. Anyone else could very well be ripped apart entirely. So this is likely the last we'll see of Neo. There's the potential that she could return in the future, but that's up in the air. She did disappear for 2 seasons before, but no one can say what will happen to her now. But RWBY laments that she never saw Little to say thank you. Honestly, Little played such a small role that you could have removed this character and not much would have changed. RWBY could have found Weiss and Blake on her own, the group could have made off with Yang's arm easily enough, and Neo could have hit the cat herself in episode 8. Blake also asks if they think they've made things worse in Ever After, but it can't be worse than it already is. The inhabitants have no sense of self and just grind themselves up over and over again. Even the environment changes, as evidenced by the paper pleasers. There are no stakes in this place to negatively impact, but the presumably new Little calls out for them to wait, now being much larger than before. But this is almost immediately contradicted by confirming that Little does not remember them. Why did you call out for them to wait if you don't know who they are? Little then takes up Jean's role as the protector of this place and rides off on Juniper. I was afraid that Little would somehow go to Remnant, and with so little to contribute in this season, I was questioning what this character would have to offer. So hand in hand, the cast step through the door and are once again face to face with the Smith, who then gives us a revelation. Apparently, the gods didn't create this place. The tree created them to bring order to Ever After. They in turn created both the cat and Jabberwocker to fulfill this purpose. The tree then gave them a way beyond this universe with the door. And that's apparently how they were in the position to create Remnant's first iteration. The Smith even mentions that whenever their creations, which are presumably humans, enter Ever After, they bring needed change. How does anyone else get here? What? Does that mean that there were others even before the main cast and Alex? That situation was unclear before, but this muddies it up still further. How could any such thing occur when getting here requires an absurd rigmarole? But Jean picks up Alex's dagger, and his youth is returned to him, banana hair and all. While that would physically make him once more the same age as the others, mentally, he still has a decade or so on them. Interactions with people of greatly different ages are different from those amongst peers because they're at different stages in life. Jean still has those memories and experiences, which are now much more than everyone he was with. He's still much older, if only in mind and not in body. That's different from Oscar, at least for now, because Oscar still exists on his own, he just has someone else in his head. The Smith then opens an Ambrosius-like portal, and Ruby asks her where they'll end up. The Smith replies, "Not where, when you're needed most." Pardon? That means that they could be thrown out who knows how much later, or even in the past, and needed most by whose measure? This is so much of a gray area that we can't even fathom what point in time they'll end up. By that measure, they could even have wound up in Remnant's first run and tried to stop Salem from going to the gods about bringing Ozma back. When you're needed most is beyond vague. Ruby then thanks the Smith. Don't do that. This thing is repulsive and conniving. It's entropy incarnate. The final shot of this volume is the main crew looking out onto the city of Vacuo with Atlesian airships and Amity Tower. It has the communications array on top of it, so that rules out this being in the past, unless it also had a similar setup at one point. And that's it. That's a wrap on Volume 9. It feels like it just started the other day, and now it's over. Unfortunately, we are no closer towards progressing the plot than we were 2 years ago. If I'm going to give my completely honest take, this was the worst season so far. I wish I could say otherwise, but that's what it is. This isn't like Volume 4, where the plot was simply meandering. This isn't like Volume 5, where it was slow. We've made no progress whatsoever. Obviously, there's a time skip in Remnant, but you could do a time skip between seasons and nothing would have changed. If the cast had just made it through the portal to Vacuo with the rest, then nothing of note would have changed. To elaborate, every chapter of a book, every scene of a movie, and every episode of a show must do something to advance the story. Ideally, you should be developing the characters and world at the same time, but the plot must advance. If that doesn't happen, you've made filler. In my own writing, I've had cool ideas that I've had to leave on the cutting room floor because they didn't meet this requirement. Sometimes you can repurpose them, but the story comes first for the sake of the story. The wheels were turning in this season, but we didn't go anywhere. If anything, this season undermined some of our main cast. Weiss, Blake, Yang, and Jean didn't care when Ruby tried to off herself. What did we get immediately after this? We get this, with them all hugging and beaming like they've just won something. This shows that they don't care about their supposed friend, no matter what they say. Actions speak louder than words. Even when they said that they care about RWBY, it was lackluster. They're apathetic to the life and well-being of someone they profess to care for. Ever After itself was just a detour. It was a place removed from the plot where there are no stakes to the world, with mechanics that were only somewhat explained. We also never get any answers on how Alex and Lewis got here, and maybe others as well. It took a Rube Goldberg machine with the staff of creation for the main cast to end up here, so how does anyone else do it? Even the characters' priorities were out of whack. During the Ponderstorm, where they were trying to make sense of what their next course of action should be, it portrays Yang and Blake's relationship as more important than the fate of the world. Jean even says that they have something more important to work out. No romance is worth more than the world, because if you lose the world, by extension you lose the aforementioned romance. People will say that it's important for the characters to have connections and behave like real people. That's true. I agree. But they also say that they want to be heroes. Heroes are selfless. That's what makes them heroic. Getting back to Remnant and keeping Salem from getting the relics is priority one. Nothing can take precedence over that. Ever. Yanking the characters out of the world for the sake of a kiss isn't worth it. The cat and the Jabberwocker were ultimately pointless, as was Little. As said earlier, Little could easily have not been included, and the Jabberwocker was never a threat to the cast. They dispatched them en masse with little effort, and the cat existed only to get RWBY back to where she was before this season began. We only got a bit more backstory on the gods, but we still have nothing on the stopping Salem front. There was no relic down here, nothing that could be used as a weapon, nothing. We're essentially back where we were. Aside from seeing the characters fall into the void in Season 8, you could skip over this one and have missed nothing. In fact, you'd be better off not witnessing everyone's reaction to RWBY trying to delete herself. Even Jean's aging was reversed. Really, the hiatus never stopped. We got to see the characters animated, but the story is in the same place it was before. This was filler. I hate saying it, but that's ultimately the case. We didn't even get development on the cast. Weiss had nothing of note. Yang and Blake got a kiss scene that could easily have been woven into the plot at any other point. Jean was effectively reset, and RWBY mentally fell only to return to where she was at square one. Hopefully, Season 10 is better than this, because we went nowhere, with the behavior of 3 of our main 4 towards the attempted offing of their 4th being absolutely revolting. The animators, audio team, and voice actors did a great job, but the writing didn't do them any favors. But now we're back to waiting, with no further developments from where we were on March 27th, 2021. I hope that Volume 10 has some developments, since we're now in Vacuo with the rest of the cast and the plot. If you've stuck around, then I'd like to thank you, and leave a like if you're so inclined, and subscribe to see more. And may you all have a weapon in each hand.